And welcome back to a Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John Ochorumbolo, and this is Chris Sapanis, my co-host as usual. We are continuing our series on the divisional breakdowns, and this week we are in the Southern Division, starting off with the AFC South.
We're going down south.
The dirty, dirty South. Before we jump into the meat of the content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification button so you get all our divisional breakdowns and all our future content, because season's coming up, and during the season, we're going to be dropping plenty of brain nuggets for you for your teams and your starts and sits, waiver wire options, etc. So be sure to hit that notification button so you get all the information that we're throwing out there to make the best choices for your fantasy teams. All right, let's jump on in. Let's go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I figure why not start with the divisional winners last year. They were 9-8. Vegas has them at 9.5. I think that's a good number. I would take the over on it because, again, I don't think the rest of the division has improved enough to move the needle in terms of fighting for that. In fact, Titans are the only ones that I could see being a race for the divisional title. But that being said, go ahead.
Can I jump in really quick? With you had two teams last year with the Colts and the Texans that were sub 4 win teams. Even if they get another 2 wins, if one of those are in the division, I can see the Jags taking. A lot of people are saying the Jags are going to run away with this division. I think this division's got a lot more competitive.
I'm not saying they're running away with the division.
They're the best team in the division, but
yeah, they are. They should win it, but I think the Titans have a chance. But we'll get to the Titans at the end of this episode here. But Jaguars, they scored 100 more points last year as a team than anybody else in their division. So that just goes to show the caliber of the team they are. They were 12th in passing yards in the NFL, 9th in passing attempts in the NFL. The number that was a little bit different for me that I think they can improve upon this year was their rushing, if they really want to break themselves into a top AFC contender. And they were 16th in rushing attempts and 14th in yards. So obviously they were only top 10 in passing attempts. They weren't top 10 in any other category. I believe that's going to change this year. They were 11th in the NFL in total touchdowns. So this team scored often, which is what you want when you want a piece of a fantasy team, or on your fantasy, you want a piece of a team. And that's what we're going to go over here. You've got Trevor Lawrence, ADP 54th overall. He was QB8. He went for 4,100 yards, 25 touchdowns. He had another 291 on the ground and 5 touchdowns rushing. The biggest thing that he went from his rookie year to here, besides changing of the coaching staff, which was, I think, the most important thing for him, was he had a 6% increase in completion percentage. And that was just a world of difference for him and that team. Now, probably helped getting people like Christian Kirk. It helped getting someone like Marvin Jones and Zay Jones playing well. And then obviously getting Travis Etienne out the backfield does that to you as well. But as QB8, QB8's right around where I have him as my QB in terms of rankings, like 8, 9, 10, that range. So where he's going, where people are drafting him, is right about where he is. Now, somebody who I think on this team is the running back position. Where do you rank Travis Etienne, a guy who finished RB16 last year with 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns and another 316 through the air?
Well, I think that, going into the season, coming out of last season, I was really hopeful. I'm like, all right, well, he can really take over this backfield. He's really going to have control. And then they go and draft Tank Bigsby. And now I'm not too sure on, listen, I still like him. I think he's going to be, a high-end RB2 in terms of fantasy production. You had Doug Peterson come out today, or not today, a couple days ago, and say that he wants to run ETN. He thinks ETN can be a 1,700, 1,800 rushing yards guy. And he could. But unless he's getting in the end zone, if he gets stopped anywhere in the red zone, Tank Bigsby is probably going to end up taking some goal line work from him. I think Bigsby is going to cut into ETN's workload at least second half of the season. Not off the start, but ETN has a couple issues. All right, he wasn't very efficient in the red zone, and he fumbles. And those are my big two concerns on him, because in those two scenarios, there's going to be short yardage work. So he's going to lose a lot of short yard rushes. He's going to lose goal line work, and if his touchdown numbers aren't great, 1,300 yards is still good, right? Like I like him in that range with like Pollard, Aaron Jones. Like I like him in the, I would go and draft him in the second round. Breece Hall is another guy. There's a ton of people I would take him over. I'm gonna really stay consistent with this. I'm gonna still say I would rather have I'd rather have ETN over Bijan. And that's just based on this offense that we know what this offense is. This offense we expect to be better. And so I like ETN in the second round, and if he falls to the end of the second round, someone's going to get a steal there at an RB2 position.
Well, yeah, 31 overall. He's falling to the end of that second round. In a lot of mock drafts that I've done, he's fallen to the turn, which is, pretty huge for somebody. If you think about one of those first 3 to 5 teams grabbing, your Jefferson, your Jamar Chase, your Kupp, or your Hill, or any of those, to get someone like ETN as your RB1, you're going to have the opportunities. I think the biggest thing to me, the one number, and you said it, you hit the nail on the head with the running back red zone efficiency. He was 9th overall in red zone touches, which is huge for you as a running back. But when you bring in a guy like Tank Bigsby, who's got the size that can plug the ball into the end zone, ETN, isn't the biggest running back either. He wasn't playing like your smaller backs, like your, back in the day, your Warwick Dunn or current time Austin Eckler, where every time they got the ball in the red zone, there was a good chance they were making it in the end zone there. So you may see, I could see some situation here where I don't think the touches are going to be 50-50. I don't think they'll even be 60-40, but you're going to have a thunder and lightning situation here that you saw with the Giants when Jacobs was young, when you saw with Allstott when he came to Tampa Bay with Warwick Dunn, like situation like that, where when they need the tough yards, it's going to probably go to Bigsby unless they're going to go through the air, and then ETN's your guy because he only had 3 drops on the season and his target percentage was pretty high as well. So I like ETN. I'd love him his yards per reception was number 5 amongst running backs. It was at 9 yards per reception.
Really
so it was
effective.
very efficient. To me, I like him. I think I love him as an RB2, as my second RB off the board, especially, but I'd be happy with him as my first running back off the board too. I also am targeting Tank Bigsby because that's a guy who can, I'm not talking 17 touchdowns like Jamal Williams, but you could have a guy that all of a sudden shows up and he's got 6 touchdowns on the ground. Like you're looking at an AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones situation here. I think is what probably a good comp with a little less touches.
Keeper leagues, dynasty leagues, go and grab Tank Bigsby. And again, if anything happens to ETN, he's going to be a guy there, and he can take a majority of the workload. When I said earlier that he's going to cut into the workload, again, I didn't mean like a 50-50 split, even a 60-40 split, but for him, he's going to take a lot of the significant carries, not just end game running the clock out. He's going to take significant carries away. And unless ETN just comes out of nowhere and super efficient, but we also saw how quick they were to kind of move off of James Robinson. And James Robinson, the first 3 games, was pretty effective for the Jaguars last year. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, we got someone younger and someone better. And Robinson's 26, 27, so he's not old.
Well, he also just got signed by the Patriots and then released by the Patriots, and then the Giants have him. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the Giants roster. So something's going on with James Robinson, period, too, as well.
Yeah, I get it, but having that quick turnover where it's just moving from one efficient guy to the next, it's like, I don't think teams are afraid to do this at the running back position anymore, especially guys that they're not drafting high end. In the top 10 picks, or in the first round, teams aren't required to pay these guys a lot of money. So for them to move on to someone who might help their team better, again, ETN is going to be a high-end RB2 this year. I can make the argument for him getting into the RB1 situation. I think he's going to be one of those borderline, like I think he can finish RB10 overall, but I also think he can finish RB18 overall. So he's kind of in that mid-range.
I think RB16 is where he finished last year. He only had 5 total touchdowns, and he had 1,400 total yards. I could see him ending up with 1,500 total yards. But for him to get into the top 10, he's going to need to have 10 total touchdowns. And I think that's the part that's going to be difficult with all the weapons that we're about to get into on the receiving game on top of that. So going into the wide receiver, and by the way, Travis Etienne also was a first-round pick versus Tank Bigsby being a third-round pick. So obviously the team is invested in Etienne and they like him. New coaching staff and everything like that, but they're invested in him financially as well. But as we know with the running backs, that doesn't mean much because everybody's treating them like a dime a dozen. So going to the wide receivers, this is one wide receiver room that has been a carousel over the past couple years, and it continues going from last year to this year. We lose Marvin Jones Jr. and we gain Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley comes in, he's your pseudo wide receiver one, even though Christian Kirk was the wide receiver one last year. Calvin Ridley's going 43rd overall as your wide receiver 17 off the board for a guy who hasn't played in pretty much 2 years. Christian Kirk out of the slot is going 69 overall, wide receiver 26 for a guy who finished as wide receiver 11 in fantasy last year. And let's not forget Zay Jones. Which of these three do you find as the best value?
I mean, I think I'm not going to talk about Zay Jones. I mean, I know he's efficient in his numbers, and you can get him for pretty cheap. But
I mean, pretty much free.
I
to be honest with you.
Yeah, I want Calvin Ridley or Christian Kirk, and I think both their values are really good compared to other guys around where they're being drafted. I mean, you're looking Calvin Ridley, what you said, 43rd overall, so fourth round. End of fourth round, middle fourth round, and then you're looking at Christian Kirk with 69th overall. So you're looking sixth round, seventh round value on those guys. I think that's really good value for what you're going to get there. I like Christian Kirk's value a little bit more. I think he is, they use him kind of at every position. He gets the majority of his work out of the slot. We've talked about this before. I think he's the best slot receiver in the game in terms of what they can do with him and what he ends up producing out of the position. Having Calvin Ridley on the other side, where people overreact to workout videos. It's so much different when you get into pads. But Calvin Ridley's a really, really, really good route runner, and I know people are making the argument that Ridley is, the only time he's really had productive numbers was when he was hyper targeted, and it's like, no, he had Julio on the other side, and he still commanded over 100 targets. Like, he's a good receiver, and I think people forget that because he's missed some time away from football. And I think that's the biggest thing to keep an eye on is, like, he's young enough where I don't think that's going to be significant, but like we saw Josh Gordon step away when he was young and then come back and not be as efficient and not be as productive as he was. And so I don't know if the best years are behind Calvin Ridley, but he's stepping into an offense where, again, like, he's just a piece of the puzzle. He's not being, they're not asking him to come out and be this guy that he's not. Like, they're going to go and ask him to be part of the wide receiver room, not be the one guy that's come in there and going to make a huge change and huge difference. I like this offense enough, and especially in the passing game, that I wouldn't mind either having either one of these guys on my team. If you miss out on Calvin Ridley, go and get Christian Kirk. Like, you're going to want a piece of this passing offense. And if you miss out on those guys, Evan Ingram is a really good option too.
Well, and obviously ADP is changing every single day. In fact, I just updated the numbers. Calvin Ridley's dropped one spot to wide receiver 18 right now. And Amari Cooper taking over the wide receiver 17 spot. I wonder if that too has to do with maybe the D-Hop trade, but we'll look to see where he is on this list. But here's the thing about the value for Calvin Ridley. You're talking about a guy who the last time we had him out there, he was wide receiver 4 finish. And then he was going into a season without Julio Jones, which he didn't even play the full season. He left due to mental health reasons, and then boom, lost another whole season with gambling. So that being said, he was coming off a wide receiver 4 finish. So he was a top 5 option, and you're going to be getting him in the 4th round, which is crazy good value if he can repeat that. But if he still finishes out as a top 12 wide receiver in the NFL, you're still getting good value with them at wide receiver 17 or 18. And that year that he finished wide receiver 4, he did have Julio Jones only for 9 games, but still had Julio Jones for the majority of those games. If he could post the similar numbers as he did as a number 1 in Jacksonville with the help of Christian Kirk and the other weapons around him, which will assist in doing that, I think it could. But again,
did he have
Christian
10
Kirk,
touchdowns that season?
he had 9 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So he had 9. He only had 90 receptions, but
so
he
the
had
numbers,
almost 1,400 yards.
So he's going to have to score, and that's my concern with any of these wide receivers. It is hard for me to make an argument that they're going to be top 15 guys. Even I can't really see a scenario where one of them is going to be hyper targeted. And so I think you might see 3 guys all have around the 80 to 90 target mark. And if you have that, then touchdowns, either a guy's going to have to be super efficient, or you're going to have a bunch of guys that have 6 touchdowns. And I just don't think that's good enough to be in the top 10 for a passing league where there's so many dynamic weapons out there.
Here's the thing. Zay Jones had 5 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
I think Zay Jones is the one who takes the back seat, obviously, here, especially because Christian Kirk.
What changed?
Well,
because what changed from last year with Zay Jones is because Zay Jones is still playing the same Zay Jones position. Calvin Ridley just replaced.
Yeah, but they're not running. They're not. Yeah, no, he doesn't. Calvin Ridley replaces Zay Jones, who was the outside man, because Christian Kirk last year, he was number 3 in terms of receivers with the most snaps run from the slot with 494. So the outside man was Zay Jones, and now it's going to be Calvin Ridley.
Zay Jones.
They didn't run that. If you want to look up to see how many sets they ran with 3 wide, then yeah, you can argue that for sure. So Zay Jones is going to be involved there. But when you run a 2 wide receiver set, because don't forget, Evan Ingram lines up out wide. He lines up in the slot. So I think at the end of the day, you have to see the target share for Zay Jones going down. At that point. So Christian Kirk also had a 23.2% target share on the team. I think that number goes down closer towards 20. And I think you're going to see Calvin Ridley be around 20. And I think you're going to see Evan Ingram's 17% target share go up a little bit more, around 19. So to me, I like Calvin Ridley. I'm targeting Christian Kirk because the value in round 6 is insane to me. So I'd rather, if you don't get Calvin Ridley, because the hard part about Ridley, and I'm just going to put this out there before we move on to Evan Ingram, and we talk about the Jaguars, is he's going right now 43rd overall. Right above him is Joe Mixon, Amari Cooper, Aaron Jones, Justin Herbert. So you've got a QB6, you've got a running back 17, kind of at the end of a tier there, and then you've got right below him Keenan Allen, Dameon Pierce, and TJ Hockenson, who's tight end 3. So you're going to really have to see what the makeup of your team is when Calvin Ridley swings over to you. Because if Hawkinson's sitting there for you, or say somebody fades on Mark Andrews and you got that tight end there, the value is going to be at that position versus going somewhere else. But also, again, at the end of the day, if you went heavy running back and you need a wide receiver, this guy can give you wide receiver 1 possible numbers here. And that's the guy you can take a shot on. Or you go with the safer floor with Keenan Allen because you know what you're getting out of him on a high volume offense passing wise. So I like Ridley. I think Christian Kirk is where the biggest value is. And I said that last year and it proved to be the right value. I just missed him in our draft, getting him in the 6th round, the guy who finished wide receiver 11. I don't think he finishes in the top 12 again, but I think he finishes in the top 18.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they, again, you look at the numbers last year where you had 83 receptions, 82 receptions, 73 receptions. Those are the top receiving leaders out of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think Trevor Lawrence does spread the ball out. He's not hyper fixated on one guy. I think that Christian Kirk, they're going to be matchups. And so you saw this last year where, Evan Ingram had complete blow up games where he was the matchup nightmare for a team. And they took advantage of it. And you're going to see Calvin Ridley do the same, and you're going to see Christian Kirk do the same. I think that you might have some guys that you might have all 3 of these guys end up posting. Evan Ingram might post a top 7 tight end finish. You might have both Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley post top 20 wide receiver numbers, but I just don't see any of them breaking through into that top 10 range or the top 5 tight end range just based on volume. Like I just don't see it.
Yeah.
Just there's too many guys there that are part of the receiving game.
Yeah, and last note on the receivers before we get to Ingram and then move on to our next team is in terms of it, you had 700 snaps for Marvin Jones last year. So when you look at the total number of snaps that he had there, that's a huge number that's going to be vacated. Obviously, Ridley's coming in. You still had 930 snaps by Zay Jones. And so he obviously was the first outside man out there. To me, like I said, I think that number goes down for Zay Jones. Christian Kirk had 991 snaps. I think that number is going to stay the same just because of how many snaps he takes out of the slot. Now, Evan Ingram is an interesting guy too. He was tight end 6 last year with 766 yards and 4 touchdowns. That touchdown number is a little low. He had a 17% target share. But here's the crazy part for me. The touchdown number seems low for a position, but he was still tight end 6 because tight ends outside of like we said before, you get past those first couple, the touchdown numbers go down. Yeah. But here's a number that goes in his favor that I think can stay the same way. He had 6 top 9 finishes last year and 2 more added on during the divisional and wild card round. He only had 9 red zone targets. That's the scary part for me for someone like him. So that's why those touchdown numbers were low, but he was number 2 for tight ends in yards after the catch. The way they used him last year when he started going off, they used him in screen passes, swing passes out the side, wheel routes, all over the place. They were creating mismatch, drag routes. So when you looked at him, to me, he had the most snaps out of the slot too as a tight end. He was number 1 out of the slot, which creates a complete mismatch. You're already a mismatch with his athleticism. Now you're out of the slot too as well. So you're not taking a linebacker off the line. You're taking a linebacker in open space. So I like him again. If you're taking a flip of a coin of a guy that's going to create opportunities for Trevor Lawrence. And I, again, don't look for him to finish with Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, even maybe Hawkinson or Kittle numbers. But to be tight end 6, he put up solid numbers where you could have started him from week to week and you had the upside of being a top 7 tight end finish. And you had the downside of him fading away in a game, in a situation. So it's just like how every other tight end in that area is. But I do like him, and they just made a good extension for him. I think he'll find his, and he's just a talented tight end. So
bet you has better numbers than Darren Waller.
I bet you he doesn't. But that being said, moving on. Let's go to the Houston Texans. Houston Texans finished 3-13-1 last year. Vegas odds have him winning at 6.5. Again, not a difficult thing to do in this division when you play the Colts twice. But you got to score points to win football games, and they were second worst in the league in total touchdowns. So that, again, is not going to help them. And part of the problem last year was game script took them out of games in terms of their running and passing. They were 13th in passing attempts and 25th in passing yardage. So that, just because they passed more, didn't equate into actual production. The big one is they had a really good running back in Dameon Pierce last year. However, he only played 13 games, and they ended up being 3rd last in rushing attempts and 2nd last in rushing yardage total. So again, they abandoned the run, and they were playing from behind pretty much almost all the games. You got a new quarterback in CJ Stroud here. He's going 172 overall, QB 25. I mean, as he should. He's a rookie. Where is this a quarterback that you're going to try and stash in a draft here? If you get one of the top guys, or is this a guy you're going to try and pair with somebody a little bit more steady Eddie in hopes for the upside for a guy who threw 85 total touchdowns in 2 seasons in college and only 12 interceptions, 8,100 yards? Yeah. I mean, the guy's efficient.
I think you could do either one. The one thing I'm not doing is I'm not just drafting him. So
correct.
I think he's a smart play if you go and get Lamar or Tua to grab CJ Stroud, because chances are, yeah, CJ Stroud is going to be pretty darn good. But it might take him a couple weeks. So you're not going to start the season with him as your starter. You go ahead and you have a guy this season with Lamar or with Tua. I wouldn't draft. So this is another thing. I wouldn't draft him with Kyler Murray. Like, you want that late season from Kyler Murray. So I think it's going to take him a couple weeks to kind of figure it out. I think he has a lot of upside. I mean, he was a really, really good, talented quarterback coming out of college. We saw what he can do in high stakes games. We saw what he was doing against elite defenses. And he played really, really well. And he also had a lot of weapons around him. And I think he has a lot of weapons around him now. We're gonna talk about the weapons in just a second, but with CJ Stroud, he offers more than David Mills did. He's more mobile. He has better arm strength. I think we might see him throw some interceptions. It might take him a second to figure it out. That this is not easy for a lot of guys to make the college to NFL transition. We saw Trevor Lawrence, who was one of the most touted prospects at the quarterback position over the last 10 years, come out and really struggle in his rookie year, and he's starting to figure it out. So it takes these guys a little bit. For dynasty, like, he's probably the rookie quarterback I want this year more than anyone. I know a lot of people are talking about Anthony Richardson and his upside and all this. It's like, do you trust anyone that has under a 60% completion percentage in college? Do you just trust anyone?
Under a 55%.
People are knocking on Justin Fields. We've seen Justin Fields and the elite running capabilities of Justin Fields. And Justin Fields in college was a really efficient passer, a really accurate passer. And if people are making the argument that he's not an elite passer, are the same people that making the argument that Anthony Richardson is going to suddenly figure it out with what? With Michael Pittman? That's it. I mean, I like Josh Downs as a young rookie, but I don't think he's going to be, Alec Pierce is an average receiver.
Solid.
He's an average receiver, a solid average receiver. Like, what? And with the turmoil that's happening at the run game, at least he doesn't have that to come into. Like CJ Stroud, like, you can make the argument now that, they do have two really good running backs. They have Dameon Pierce, and they brought in Devin Singletary. So it's going to help a young quarterback out to be able to run the football. This team is in the right. They're taking steps in the right direction to surprise the league. And like I've compared them to the Jets from last year. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs like the Giants. So you always want to compare people to your team, but like, they're not going to make the playoffs. It's a different. Like, they're going to be in games. They're going to show flashes, but they're also going to show flashes of how young they are. And I think that's going to be the case with the Texans this year. And then you look at, the entire roster. There's not a ton of like veteran presence on this offensive. Robert Woods is the old man in the room, and we don't think he's going to be really. I think he's the odd man out in terms of receiver. But for CJ Stroud, I go draft another guy. Jared Goff is a great guy that I would draft, and then Derek Carr, and then draft CJ Stroud later. Like, I have Deshaun Watson. I'm more than likely going to keep him. So I probably am not going to draft CJ Stroud. I could in the
where he's going, you could get him in the 14th round, and then you've got two guys. The reason why you're drafting CJ Stroud is for upside. So you're not drafting CJ Stroud. To me, if you take one of the top, 6 quarterbacks out there, you get Lamar, Herbert, Hurts, Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, like, you get one of those top 6 guys. I'm not drafting CJ Stroud before the 15th round because there's no real need to, because when you're drafting CJ Stroud, you want to draft for upside, unless you're in a keeper league or, different situation. But if you're in a redraft, why are you going to go take that second quarterback when you're the top guy? But if you fade quarterback and you get Matt Stafford, you get Jared Goff, you get Kirk Cousins, you get any of these guys that there is variability in their outcomes, why not take a chance on a guy who's got an upside? Again, the guy's he threw 44 touchdowns 2 years ago. He threw 41 last year with only 6 interceptions each season. So he was efficient. He had just a hair under 70% completion percentage in his career. He's a great quarterback, and he's coming into a situation where he's got nothing to lose, mostly because at the end of the day, everybody around him is also some new faces, and they're building a new coaching staff. Like everything's new. So I like him. And then let's go to the returning running back here, Dameon Pierce, and the new running back on the team, Devin Singletary. Pierce is RB17, Singletary RB47. They're 30 RB spots behind each other. In overall, though, they're almost 100 picks between them. So Dameon Pierce only played 13 games, finished at running back 29, and Singletary finished RB 25 in a full season. Pierce had a 4.2 yard per carry, while Singletary had a 4.6, was very efficient as well. Both of them had 30 plus receptions. Singletary did more with it. They both scored a touchdown, but you're talking about 281 yards for Singletary on 8 more catches versus 165 for Pierce. So Singletary was a better pass protector, and he was more efficient in the receiving game, but he did play for Buffalo. So it's apples to oranges to me there. I like Pierce here. Some people can say it's too rich for his blood, that he's gonna bust this season, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. It's a new coaching staff. They don't have the stake in him because they're not the team that drafted him. He is a later draft pick, but the guy played hard. He's a violent runner, earned himself the starting role. I just think the way this team's going to move, it's going to move through CJ Stroud, where last year it moved through Dameon Pierce. I think that's going to be the biggest difference, and that's what scares me about Pierce. It could help him because he did see one of the most run stuffing stacked boxes most of the time because the teams forced them to pass the ball. However, you're running through CJ Stroud, you're running through your passing game, you bring in Dalton Schultz to help that out. Dameon Pierce here, if he gets better in his pass protection, which we've heard he is, maybe he sees himself in a little bit more passing opportunities. But I think you bring in Devin Singletary to get fresh legs out there for a team that did something very unique in Buffalo, where they passed a lot more than they ran the ball. He's somebody perfect to come in for those third down plays, long down plays. So that Pierce is someone I'm targeting, but I'm targeting him as my RB2. If you're doing a 0 RB situation, there's other people out there that I think are going to give you better volume opportunities.
Well, I don't think it's a volume issue. I think I want a more efficient runner if I'm going 0 running back. I want a guy that's going to score more than 5 touchdowns this season total. And I want a guy that's going to
he's
rush
efficient
for 1,000
with his
yards.
At 4.2. He's efficient. He would have rushed for 1,000. He only played 13 games. Don't forget, he would have been easily over 1,000 yards.
He had 200, but he had 220 carries and he ran for 939 yards. Yeah, he had a 4.3 yard average, but you look at a lot of these other guys that have 220 carries and they're all over 1,000 yards. And that's, especially from a 0 running back scenario, like that's what you want. Like go and get James Conner, go and get Cam Akers, who have the productivity to do that, and they score touchdowns. I do think I said this early on. I think this is going to be a much more split backfield than people think. You brought in one of the most efficient runners in the NFL with Devin Singletary, coming from a playoff contender.
Yep.
And a team where he was not asked to run the ball a lot. And he was not asked to run the ball as the primary runner behind Josh Allen. I think he adds some stability. And yeah, Dameon Pierce can get better on third down all he wants. I still think that this is going to be I think this is truly a series by series running back scenario where it's not going to be Singletary just spelling him on short yardage and third downs. It's going to be a true series by series.
I could see that happening too as well.
The one thing concerning about Pierce is, he played in 13 games. He had 4 fumbles in those games. It is concerning that he had that. And yeah, he faced some stacked boxes, but he got a lot of garbage time. They were down by 2 or 3 scores and, they're passing. They run a draw and he breaks one off and it padded his numbers a little bit to jump the efficiency up. I like Dameon Pierce for where he's being drafted. I'm by no means want to overdraft him. Like this is a guy ideally I want to slip to me in a round with someone else not taking a chance on him. But for literally 100 picks later, I can go and get Devin Singletary really, really late in the draft. And he's going to probably have split touches in that backfield. And I'd rather do that. And we talked about value guys and value picks. This is a guy where Singletary is much more valuable at where he's being drafted than Dameon Pierce is. And potential, like Singletary's done it too. He was number 26 last year, 25 the year before.
He was 25 last year. So he's a top 25 pick going at RB47. And he split touches last year. Here's the thing I will say before we move on to these receivers. Yeah. Well, here at the end of the season, he wasn't the primary runner, though. I mean, they started sieving carries and touches to Cook. But talking about Devin Singletary, the one thing I will say about him, you said about his efficiency. Well, Dameon Pierce, in order to do what he did, I think he commanded like the highest team carry percentage, I think, out there, if I'm correct. Like,
the next guy behind him had 180 less rushes.
Yeah. So when you look at it,
it was a Goombawale.
Oh, that was next.
That was next in terms of rushes on the year, and he had 180 less carries. Yeah, so you're right. He had the majority of the workload there, and for a guy to have literally 180 more touches than the next guy behind you, and you fail to reach 1,000 yards. I mean,
but he only played 13 games. He would exactly take that with a grain of salt. But I agree with you. Like, that's what I'm saying is I don't see him commanding that percentage this year, and that's where I feel like 4th round is too rich for me. 5th round is where I'm looking to target Dameon Pierce. If he falls out of the 4th round to the 5th round, that's where your value is going to be. But again, you can go with Devin Singletary all the way in the 13th round. And grab somebody that's got, or 12th round that's got you a little bit more opportunity. So let's move to the receivers, because this is kind of a mixed bag here. There's a pseudo number one, but we don't know who's going to emerge as the leading receiver at this team. Last year, Nico Collins showed flashes of what he can do for this team, and he's going as a pseudo number one at wide receiver 59, 146 overall. He only played in 10 games, 481 yards and two touchdowns. Like I said, though, this team, even though they were 13th in passing attempts, they were only 25th in passing yardage. So they were not efficient. But you've got 2 other receivers here outside of Robert Woods that are coming into their first full season in the NFL. And one is a rookie, and I guess you can treat the other as technically a rookie. And that's Tank Dell and John Mechie. Tank Dell is going off the charts. You can get him for free at wide receiver 82, and Mechie's going at one of the last picks, if not off the charts as well, at wide receiver 73. Both guys were very good in college. Tank Dell had 2 back-to-back seasons of 1,300 plus yards and 12 touchdowns. John Mechie's final season in Alabama with Jamison Williams, he still had 96 catches for 1,142 and 8. The difference between these two guys is John Mechie's 6 foot 195. Tank Dell is a little 5'10", 155, plays fast and strong. So I don't know who's going to emerge at the wide receiver 2. I don't know if Nico Collins is going to keep the wide receiver 1 for the full season. It seems like their rapport is going well during camp so far, because you have 2 talented wide receivers in Mechie and Tank Dell. And obviously Mechie drafted 2nd round. Tank Dell, he was 2nd round as well. So when you look at these 2 guys, I don't remember where Nico Collins was drafted. I could look that up in a second. Tank Dell's part of the new regime. John Mechie's part of the old regime, but he is an Alabama receiver, and we know how well they do. We just got done talking about Calvin Ridley and, touting Julio Jones. I mean, Mari Cooper's still out there. Jamison Williams was his teammate. Like, you look at the wide receivers from Alabama, and all of them are productive in the NFL and highly, highly used offensive weapons. So it's tough for us to tell you, go with this guy, go with that guy. To me, my sleeper pick is John.
Only 1 reception.
Yeah. But my pick is John Mechie here. Chris's pick is Tank Dell here as sleeper picks. These guys you can get for pretty much free at the end of the draft as a bench player. But if one of them hits, it's on, because Nico Collins is going at wide receiver 59. Like, that's almost free for wide receiver too.
Can I interject and say something? I think this is my bold prediction of the 2023 fantasy football season. All right.
Bold prediction or bold prediction?
Bold bold prediction.
Not bald.
I mean,
Okay.
both. It's a bald, bold prediction. That's what this is. Fresh shave, like a baby's bottom, right?
I know you got sheen going on right there. I like it. Joil it up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'd really try to shine it. But here's my bold prediction: is that there's going to be a Texan that is drafted that is going to win a lot of leagues this year. I think this is one of the most value. They have tons of guys on this team to draft at value that have the potential to perform really, really, really well. I think there's a lot of guys going under the radar on this team. And you look at it, even from CJ Stroud to Singletary, Nico Collins, John Mechie, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz is even going at value. Like, there's a lot of guys on this team that you can essentially get for free, if not with a post 10th round pick. And the guy that you get that's going to blow up, whether it be Mechie, whether it be Tank Dell, whether it be, Schultz later on or Nico Collins later on, like, these guys have a chance to have really, really good seasons because no one is expecting anything from them, which is why all their ADPs are so low. Because people are just assuming that this is going to be the same old Texans. Like, this is what kind of confuses me a little bit is about, like, a lot of these ranking systems is that they don't see the big picture on kind of what the teams are doing. Like, last year, you can see that the Jets, they have 3 first-round picks. The team is revamped. The defense is better. There's key pieces on offense that are really starting to come into their own, and people still just wrote them off. Like, Garrett Wilson was going in like the 10th round last year. He's an extremely talented dude, and you have guys that are going and getting drafted 4 or 5 rounds above them that have no business being there, and that are just in bad scenarios. They're older players. Like I said, I think Robert Woods is the odd man out in this. Like, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about him. Like, I think he's going to phase out really, really early.
In fact,
the
I'm not going to talk about him because I'm not even targeting him.
Yeah, I think that there's so much young talent on this team between Tank Dell and John Mechie. Again, you look at what John Mechie was doing in college, and some can argue that it was the catalyst at the receiving room that allowed the other receivers to do what they did. And you get a guy like that with Nico Collins, who is a long, lanky receiver that can go and win 50. Like I said, this team, they have a bunch of different receivers that are really, really good at certain things. Like, even with Dalton Schultz, great red zone target. Nico Collins, big, lanky 50-50 guy. Tank Dell, volume, short route, get open,
explosive,
make plays.
Give him the ball in space.
Mechie
make plays.
Is just going to be what I kind of view Mechie as is like Hines Ward, Wayne Corbett, third down receiver. He's going to go and get you the sticks. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a volume guy. I don't necessarily think he's going to be breaking away from people. I think he's going to be he's going to be an above average receiver. But I think he's going to be a key piece of this offense that's very vital to how this offense runs. I think this is a team that people better start taking notice of because in the next 2-3 years, this team's going to be good.
Yeah, so I agree with you across the board. We'll finish up with Dalton Schultz briefly. But the thing about that, like you said, is these guys are going for pretty much free. The highest pass catcher going in ADP right now is Dalton Schultz at 118 overall. And he's tight end 11. The next guy is 30 picks later in Nico Collins. So I like John Mechie. I think he's more of the overall well-rounded wide receiver. He reminds me a lot of Jalen Waddle without that breakaway speed, but the guy just finds himself open constantly. He's a good route runner, and he showed that in college. I mean, he's the one who came out from behind Jalen Waddle. Well, because the way Jalen Waddle runs.
So
I'm not. What I'm saying is, no, not find another comp because he was compared to Jalen Waddle, and the biggest difference between Waddle and him is I think the only difference, and it's a big one, in terms of what he can do. But when you take that slant across the middle, Jalen Waddle's taking that and splitting the safeties, and he's going to the end zone. John Mechie's still going to get his yardage. He, decent yards after the catch, but he doesn't have that breakaway speed there. But he's going to be used a similar way that the Dolphins used. No, I'm saying that he's going to be used the same way that Jalen Waddle's used in Miami. He's going to be used multiple different routes, multiple different trees. He's not going to be the one asked to take the top off the defense. I think Tank Dell is going to be that speedy guy that's going to spread that defense around a little bit and be a playmaker and also get collected.
Zay Jones?
Maybe.
Juju?
No, because Juju ran primarily from the slot.
That can't break away.
Well, no, you're just giving me a comp of a slot receiver in Juju. That's not going to happen. I don't think Mechie's going to be your main slot guy. I think he'll work outside and inside. But that being said, 118 overall is the best pass catcher going off the board right now for Houston in Dalton Schultz at tight end 11. I like Dalton Schultz here. Houston's always liked their tight ends. Dalton Schultz does have good command of the red zone targets as well. He's efficient there. He had 15 red zone targets last year in 15 games. So that's huge because red zone targets always equal possible touchdowns there. He had 5 total touchdowns and 500 yards in 15 total games. There's not a lot to say about him because he's part of that group that it's a coin flip, grabbing a guy like him, like we talked about Evan Ingram before. So let's move on to the Colts. Colts at 4-12-1, only one win better than the team we just talked about. They also have a 6.5 Vegas win total as well, which is a lofty goal. I think this is actually a team that if they don't get Jonathan Taylor back this season, which we'll talk briefly on him because there's not a lot to say until things become clear, they're a worse team. And that thing's going to go down. So they were 8th in passing attempts last year, but 20th in passing yards. Another team high in volume, low in efficiency, and low in production. Again, without Jonathan Taylor last year, they were 18th in rushing attempts and 23rd in rushing yards. So, these were a mirror image of a team, the two of them. Now you got Anthony Richardson as the number 1 QB coming off the board for them. Obviously, Gardner Minshew is there as well. And I think they've all but pretty much decided that Richardson's going to be the starter. He's going 110 overall,
according
QB
to
16.
According to today's depth chart, Minshew is still the number 1.
Yes. And I, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even be surprised if Minshew starts game 1. I wouldn't be surprised, but we should have more clarity.
Start the entire season. For the betterment of Anthony Richardson and the Colts for the future, I think Minshew should start this year.
But I just don't see them doing
offense, that. Let me. I know, but let me put a caveat on everything that we're going to talk about right now. Is that's what I think they should do, because Anthony Richardson, yes, he's very talented, but he's raw. He's a raw talent, and so you draft him high. Do you want to ruin that by throwing him into a scenario where your star running back and your entire offense decides he's probably not going to play and he's having a beef with the owner? So you want to start in a raw player at that? I mean, it's risky to ruin a guy's ego and ruin his headspace and how he sees the game and how he's going to develop. Like Gardner Minshew, take the beating.
Yeah. Well, it could be a situation like Justin Fields when Justin Fields came in.
That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, when Justin Fields came in, he was drafted up in top 10 pick in the NFL, and he didn't start the season right away and eventually made his way in as the Bears fizzled out. So it's not a bad thing to do, in my opinion. I just know, Jim Irsay and that whole organization has already said that they're going to get him into play. He has to get his reps in. So we know he's going to play. And he's going to play at some point, and what caliber. He's going at QB 16, so people are expecting him to start this season. And they're all taking a shot at him based on his athleticism. To me, I'm taking a shot as a second quarterback off the board, especially in like a dynasty league or a rookie redraft, or even a situation where you have a keeper league. Like maybe I'll take him, but where he's going 110 overall is too rich for me to take a guy as my second quarterback. That's the part I struggle with, unless you're going back-to-back picks. And you don't want to take him with a question mark anywhere else. Like you don't want to go with Tua with a question mark with his health issues, with concussions, and then take someone like Richardson who may not even start, and it may also have question marks about playing time and his output. So there's not a lot to talk about Richardson, except for we mentioned it already when we were previously talking about other quarterbacks, is that this guy's got a terrible completion percentage in college. He's a fantastic guy when running the ball. He's got a absolute cannon of an arm. And he's just raw talent. So if they can hone in on that and get him the reps he needs, I'm just not trusting him as a starting quarterback for me in this league. I actually thought Justin Fields was a way better put together quarterback coming into the NFL than Richardson is. And Richardson's being drafted higher than Fields was that year. And Fields still struggled. And Fields still struggled last year, only throwing under 3,000 yards. He needed 1,100 rushing yards to get himself into a top 10 quarterback situation. So I don't see that for Richardson here. Moving on from Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, biggest question mark on this team. He's going as RB7, 14th overall. That has dropped in the past couple of weeks since all the news has come out. And if you haven't had a chance to check out our video and talking about Jonathan Taylor, I'll leave a little link up here in the corner for you to click and see our training camp news when we talk about Cooper Kupp, Jonathan Taylor, Broncos situation, and J.K. Dobbins. But we'll have more clarity when it comes to the season, so I can't even ask you this question in confidence saying, are you going to take a chance on Jonathan Taylor if he slips to the second round, late second round on the turn? However, at the point that we're going into drafts at the draft season, we should have some clarity. And if there is no clarity, this guy's going to keep slipping ADP.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to evaluate this scenario. Like, I think we got some more clarity this week when the Colts signed Kenyon Drake. Now I know they're adding some more depth because of the Zach Moss injury, but Zach Moss's broken arm, he should be back by the season, maybe missed the first week or two. So you don't go and sign another running back and get depth there unless they really think that Jonathan Taylor is just not going to play. And I've said this, I've been on record saying this. I don't think Jonathan Taylor is going to play this season. I
don't think he should play.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're too far gone in terms of I don't know how much they're going to be able to repair the relationship. I think something happened. He feels disrespected. Jim Irsay is standing his ground and saying, you're going to play out your contract with us. And he's been vocal in the media about it. The fact that like they both brought it into the social media space and the public space, it does not bode well for like I said, I don't think this team is really cohesive right now. So yeah, it's really hard. Like I probably want to stay away from him. I'd rather draft Alvin Kamara than him. That he's gonna be. I mean, I'll let someone else deal with the headache. It's the same thing I did last year. It's like, Kamara was a guy that we were, he might have dealt with the suspension. With players like that, where there's so much uncertainty, let someone else deal with it. If they blow up, then fine. But like, go and get someone else that is going to be safe. Like, when you're sitting at that pick, just think like, do I want a guy that could be an RB, an RB1, or could not play the entire season?
Yeah.
And are you willing to waste a second or first, in some cases, a first round draft pick on him? I don't think Taylor's going in the first round anymore for sure, unless they in the next week or two, Jim Irsay and him are seen on a boat together partying. Like, I don't think that's going to happen.
The thing about Jonathan Taylor that I think, we'll move on to the other running backs. Well, I'll talk about which running backs that I think we should possibly go for. Jonathan Taylor here in this situation, I don't think he should play in regards to his future in the NFL, because he's not going to just get lost. It's not going to be like a Melvin Gordon situation where he held out to get money and then got it and then got traded to another team and then kind of started his career fizzled out. This is a guy who's still young. He was the rushing leader 2 years ago. If it wasn't for the ankle injury, the guy was pretty good running back to start the season last year. And you look at Jonathan Taylor, if he does not play, and he wasn't a first round pick, so he doesn't have a 5th-year option. If he doesn't play, unless he gets put on the non-football injury list, he doesn't get paid, but he doesn't play his season. He's a free agent. Now, if the Colts put him on the non-football injury list and it doesn't go against his season against him, that's going to be an interesting situation. And that's where it's going to even get uglier because they already came out and said they're not going to trade him. And why would you? Because most teams know that if they're not going to extend him and they're trying to trade him, he's going to be becoming a free agent anyway. So in my opinion, Jonathan Taylor hurts himself playing if this issue is with the contract and their disgruntled office is going back and forth with him. If he doesn't play, he just keeps himself healthy. He just gets 1 year older, and he's still going to have value for some team moving forward. Now, the other running backs.
Well, let me say something on that really quick. Like, and here's another thing. Like, you can ask for a trade all you want. We have Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Zeke Elliott, and potentially Josh Jacobs now going to be on the market. All right. Yeah. And we've seen none of them move. So we've seen what the running back market's like out there. And so the Colts, if they're going to trade him, are probably going to get like a 5th or 6th round pick, if that, for Jonathan Taylor.
And he was a 2nd round guy. He just had one massive season. That's the other thing against him.
If I'm the Colts, yeah, and Taylor really doesn't have a leg to stand on. Like if he had this last season, if he had his season from 2 years ago, last season too, and was continuing that, then he can make this argument all he wants. But he went down in production last season. And yeah, I get there's other struggles on the offense, but you went down in production. Now you're starting an argument about like contract disputes, and the owner is just saying, listen, you're playing out your contract. You signed the contract with us. It doesn't matter about nothing in there was with production. The CBA was negotiated with you guys, 5 years ago. You're gonna play this out, and it's unfortunate. It's a crappy situation for everyone involved. But like, I don't see them trading him just based on the fact that they're not going to get anything back. So with a guy like Taylor, I'm just like, all right, well, sit on the bench for 2 years. We're not really paying you a lot, so you can sit on the bench for 2 years or not decide not to play. But we're not going to trade you. You're going to honor your contract. And Irsay is the most tenured owner,
technically.
2 this year and 1 more.
You're right.
His rookie year, he ran for 1,800 yards, and then last year was his second year.
No, it's not. He was 2020. He was the class of 2020, so he's got 1 more year. 2020, 2021, 2022, and he was a 2nd round pick, so he doesn't get his 5th year option. So, but anyway, Let's move on. There's 3 running backs of note to talk about. If they were to sign nobody else and he was not to play, you have Zach Moss, Deion Jackson, Kenyon Drake. Zach Moss is my number 1 pick as a stash. He won't even fly up the ranks that far. The dude was very efficient last year in the last 4 weeks of the season, where he was getting 24, upwards of 24 carries, averaged about probably 15 to 18 carries. In the final 3 weeks, he had no less than a 4.9 yard per carry. In fact, the last game of the season when he played Houston, he was 18 for 114 with 6.3 and a touchdown. He was running back 3 on the season. So would I take a chance on him? Yes. I think he's not involved in the passing game. And running back through the week. Yeah. Not the season. Sorry. The week. Yeah. And the only reason I would go maybe Deion Jackson over him, because you're not going to be taking Zach Moss as your running back 2. You're taking him as a flex. This team's going to end up having to pass a lot more too as well. And Zach Moss was not involved in the passing game that often at all, both in Buffalo and the last year when he was on the field. Deion Jackson is going to be that guy, I think, for before the Indianapolis Colts, unless Kenyon Drake, who always shines when he's given the ball, comes out of nowhere and establishes himself. So again, this backfield, a little bit more clarity to come over the next 4 weeks. Let's move on to the receiving core that does have quote unquote clarity, but does not have the upside at all in this division. And that's with Michael Pittman. You mentioned Alec Pierce, Josh Downs. There's also Isaiah McKenzie there. Don't forget, all of whom you can pretty much get free for Downs and McKenzie. Pittman is going wide receiver 38, 73 overall. I think he's a wide receiver 2 at best for me. But here's some staggering stats that I think, to me, stand out for someone like Pierce that makes him a value pick at wide receiver 38 because of his possible upside. He was number 1 for snap share amongst wide receivers. He was number 8 in terms of receptions. He was number 3 in routes run, number 2 in number 7 in win rate, number 2 in routes won as well, not just run, but won. And he was number 3 in routes won versus man coverage. So the guy's very good at catching the ball when the ball's thrown to him because he gets up, he's got a good catch radius, good contested catch ability. Again, at wide receiver 38, he's possibly your flex player at that point, or a bench wide receiver, depending on how you draft. And I'm looking at that as a good opportunity. Am I drafting him as my wide receiver too? No, because I think the floor can drop out of him really quickly, depending upon who's at quarterback and how this team's doing. So the other wide receivers, I'm not even touching again, because 8th in passing attempts last year, they could be up in the top 10 in passing attempts this year, but if Anthony Richardson's playing, I don't expect 20th in passing yardage and that efficiency and volume to go up anymore. I don't, you had Matt Ryan, who was a very good quarterback, not being able to do it there. You had a carousel the past couple of years that haven't been able to do it there. I just don't see it getting much better situation for them. What are your thoughts on Pittman? Is that somebody that you are going to try and target as a late pick, or is this some guy that you're, no matter what, because this offense, you're just steering clear of?
Yeah, I'm not steering clear of him, and I'm not there. There's another guy on this team that I really like at his value, which is free. I'd love me a free player. I just really do. But Pittman is a guy like Pierce, where I'd rather him slip around or two before I draft him. I still would like to have him. Like, again, as a flex play, like that's not a flex play, a bench guy, like having depth, especially he's a wide receiver 1 on that team, and he's a true wide receiver 1 on that team. And he's a guy that can go up there and win 50-50 balls. I like guys like that, where it's just like, screw it, chuck the ball downfield, chuck the ball to him, especially with an inaccurate throw like Anthony Richardson. Just chuck the ball up there, let's see if he can get it. I'm not overdrafting him. Like, again, I'm not drafting him to be a wide receiver 1. I'm sure as heck not drafting him to be a wide receiver 2. I think there's better values there that I can get. There's different draft strategies that I would rather implement to not have him as my wide receiver 2. And I think there are guys going around him that I would probably prefer to have over him in a wide receiver 2 role. As a flex play, I like him.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the wide receivers that are going around him. Hold on. Before you get into that, let's finish with Pittman. Brandon Ayuk's 1 spot before him, overall and and receiver-wise. Tyler Lockett's 2 picks after him. Marquise Brown is 3 picks after him. Mike Evans is 5 picks after him. Deontay Johnson 6. So, like, those are the names that you're deciding, and those guys I think have better opportunities than he does, whether they're the wide receiver 2 or 1 for their team. So that's my thought on Pittman too, is I feel like Pittman's too rich for that 7-8 turn. I'm getting him on the 8-9 turn if he falls. So, Josh Downs, I know is your guy.
My free. Yeah. Josh Downs is the guy that for free that I would want to get, especially if you're in a dynasty sleeper league. This guy I think is going to be, he's very similar to Tank Dell. I don't know what it is about these short receivers that I like, but I like guys that are productive in college, especially that are these if they play D1 and they're this size and they're catching over 100 balls and they're catching over 1,000 yards and they're catching over double-digit touchdowns. Like, there's something to say about that. And you can argue that they're playing in weaker conferences all you want. They get open all the time and they make catches and they're efficient. And especially with mobile scrambling quarterbacks and the way the NFL is moving, you want possession guys. You want guys that catch the ball and can move in space and get open. And Downs is a guy that can absolutely do that. So he's a late flyer. Again, a guy that you can get in the 14th, 15th round or just pick up off waivers, but someone to keep an eye on, especially in training camp. He's been impressive so far and has developed kind of a rapport with Anthony Richardson already. So, yeah, it's a guy I like opposite. Pittman, again, Downs is a guy you can move into the slot. You can play on the outside. So I would definitely keep an eye on him.
All right, let's round off the Colts with talking about the tight end position. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because
Why?
they shift around with the tight ends here and there, but Jelani Woods is number one on the depth chart. Here's the only thing I will say, and if you look at the pattern about amongst these running quarterbacks, they all tend to have a tight end that has good production in the NFL. When you look at what Cole Kmet did in Chicago last year, what the tight ends have done in Buffalo over the course of years, Dawson Knox, and now they've got Dalton Kincaid there, who should see a decent uptick. You look at Jalen Hurts with Dallas Goedert, like these guys are producing. So because when you scramble, probably the closest target to you and probably the most open target to get or guy to get open is going to be your tight end. Again, that doesn't make me want to draft a Colts tight end just because Anthony Richardson's going to be starting at some point if he does, because Mo Alley Cox could be in there for a bunch of snaps. Jelani Woods would be in there for a bunch of snaps. There's just no definite person that's going to be in there. I'm sticking clear of this guy. It's not even a week-to-week flyer guy for me. There's other options better around there on the tight end spot. So moving on to the Tennessee Titans, last team in this division at 7-10 last year. They have a 7.5 Vegas odds in winning. I believe they can get the over on that. They had some bad losses last year, including the first one of the season against the New York Giants, with missing the game-winning field goal after the Giants went up by a point going for 2. Here's a situation that's another interesting one because you got Ryan Tannehill out there that played 12 games last year. I know he had a little bit of injuries here and there, but they also decided to start some other people at the end of the season to see what they had in Malik Willis. I'm interested to see what goes on in the situation if it starts to tailspin for the Tennessee Titans. I don't suspect it being because they still have plenty of good elite weapons on this offense. But Tannehill, 188 overall. He was QB 25, I believe, or QB 26 last year. He's going about QB 21 to 25, depending upon the ADP you look at. 2,500 yards in 12 games, 13 touchdowns. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. He's still somebody who's going to get the ball out of his hands and get to players. But they were 11th in rushing attempts last year, 13th in rushing yardage last year. They were 3rd least in passing attempts and 4th least in passing yardage. That's the reason I'm staying away from Tannehill. The only thing that's changed is they added a true wide receiver 1 to their team, which should increase that. But to go from 3rd worst to 3rd best is not going to happen. So I'm sticking with the wide receivers and running backs if I'm drafting anybody from this team. We lost you for a second. You're back. So Tannehill's another guy he's a game manager, solid player. He's just not as efficient and not as good as a game manager as someone like Jimmy Garoppolo. So let's talk about Derrick Henry. ADP 20 overall, RB6. He's still not getting the love. We have him in our top 5. What's the earliest in the first round you'd be drafting him in a draft?
5th, 6th,
5th overall. 5th, 6th.
I think 20th overall is ridiculous.
It's so bad.
Yeah, 20th overall, it's ridiculous. Like how I get like if you're in PPR leagues, whatever, this guy is going to have 300 rushing yards. We've seen him
300 rushing attempts.
Leading rusher. 300 rushing attempts. We've seen him have 300 rushing yard games too.
That's true.
He plays the Texans twice a year. Let me remind everyone that he plays the Texans twice a year, in which he's guaranteed 200 plus yards. So it's ridiculous that he's being drafted so low. All right, I can see the argument for Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson being drafted over him. But you're going to draft Stephon Diggs over him? You're going to draft A.J. Brown over him? You're going to draft CeeDee Lamb over him? Guys, this is why you lose weeks. Right?
Well, let me remind you, he was RB3 last year with 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. If you're going to draft a wide receiver over him, you better be confident that guy's going to get 1,500 yards and 12 to 13 touchdowns. Because if not, you're not getting the value in that pick. Because Derrick Henry is going to have 1,500 yards or more. He's going to have 10 to 15 touchdowns. And let's not forget last year, he had career high in receptions in 33 for almost 400 yards. So the guy was efficient through the air as well. I just don't see how you would not take him in the top 5 picks. Yeah.
It's guaranteed touches. You have, all right, even the most elite receivers in the league are getting 120 to 130 catches a year. This guy touched the ball 350 times last year. All right. Like, he's gonna, like, you cannot draft someone as a receiver over him unless it's a guy that can catch for 1,800 yards and have the 13 to 15 touchdown season.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like you need somebody to beat him in yardage and touchdowns.
You see it year in, year out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm with you. I'm drafting Derrick Henry again, 5th, 6th pick.
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, if there's other guys there I can make the argument that he could be there. That's probably not where I still think he should be going within the first 10 picks. If he's not, like, the people that are picking Bijan Robinson over Derrick Henry, go to hell. Like, I'm kidding, guys. Don't go to hell. But seriously, what's wrong with you? You're not going to
rethink what your strategy is. I agree. It's like I could argue Nick Chubb over him. I could argue Saquon Barkley over him, like one of those guys, because you can see he had a career high in receptions at 33 last year. I don't know if that's going to happen because apparently in camp so far, Spears has been pretty good. And the older Henry gets, they may not want to try and wear and tear him down in the passing game as much either. But that being said, say he does get another 30 catches next year. Like, again, that's going to put him in RB2, RB3 again situation. So then I look the fool for saying what I just said, but someone like Saquon, who's going to get 50 plus receptions, someone like Nick Chubb, who's going to get closer to 30 receptions without Kareem Hunt now, possibly. And, it's just, you look at everything across the board, you can switch those guys around. But to me, Chubb and Henry are 2 guys that are falling to the 2nd round that should not be falling to the 2nd round.
2 years ago, when he had the foot fracture, he was on pace for 2,000 yards rushing and like 17 touchdowns. Like, guys, stop with your nonsense. All right, stop overdrafting the shiny new thing and thinking guys like this. He is special. Like, he's not the guy that's approaching 30 years old that's going to be, oh, you know what, we should worry about him. The guy is a lineman as a running back.
Yeah. There's nobody like him in the NFL.
Him
nobody like him in the
goal
NFL.
line.
So let's move on from Henry. I love Henry. I'm drafting at the 3rd pick. So, again, one of those things that I'm looking at is, say if Christian McCaffrey and Justin Jefferson go before me, you get a choice between Henry, Eckler, Chubb, Saquon, Kupp, Chase, like all these different guys. And it's going to be who's going to, like, I don't think you could go wrong with any of the picks. Let me just tell you that there. Like, but at the end of the day,
I don't think Saquon should be in that argument. Let me just say that.
I'm saying the potential, because we're arguing too, is like, we're saying that Eckler's going to get 18 touchdowns again plus this year, and he's never rushed for 1,000. Like, you can make your argument across the board. Yeah. And Saquon was running back 2 overall, and he's done that too.
He's never rushed for over 1,300.
He did last year. So,
barely.
I mean, yeah, he rushed for over 1,300 last year. So anyway, regardless, we're talking about Henry and the Titans. You can pick, you won't be wrong not picking him there, but if you are at that like middle of the pack, end of the 1st round, and you're going with someone like you said, Devontae Adams, or you're going with a Stephon Diggs, or you're going with, one of these other running backs. I mean, why when Henry's sitting there for you? So, hey, he did it. So D-Hop gets traded to this team, or gets picked up in free agency to this team after the Cardinals cut him. He's going 50th overall, wide receiver 18. He played 9 games last year, had 717 yards and 3 touchdowns. Here's the big thing. D-Hop is still elite. He was number 4 overall wide receiver in win rate. And he was number 2 overall in win rate versus man is, again, it's the same argument I made about Michael Pittman. You throw the ball near this guy, they're going to find ways to catch it. He is the best at it. His wingspan and his hand size are what make him such a good pass catcher. He's acrobatic. I love D up here for the passing game and for Tannehill and for the running game, because it opens up the running game. If they're going to try and stop Henry, we'll try and stop D-Hop. This is why I would smash the over 7.5 on Vegas, because I just think the playmakers give you ability, and it makes Treylon Burks better, who's going at 90th overall and wide receiver 40, a whole 40 picks afterwards. Obviously, he wasn't as efficient last year, 11 games or 444 yards and only 1 touchdown. He battled his injuries. So those are the only 2 guys in the passing game I'm looking to get in terms of wide receivers, because after that, I just don't think the volume is going to be there, even with an uptick. You were a Treylon Burks owner last year. Are you going to try and get him later on? Because D-Hop is going to be going pretty early. I think D-Hop's ADP is going to keep going up a little bit more. Is Burks a guy you're going to want to target off this team if we're going to talk about wide receivers in this division?
Yeah. I mean, you kind of said it. It's not that Treylon. I think Treylon Burks in his second year will be a better player, but I think he's in a better scenario with D-Hop on the other side, because he's not being required. He's not going to be asked to do everything. You have D-Hop, who's an elite wide receiver on the other side, who can win one-on-one and get open, who's going to be more of a volume receiver. And now you can be allowed to kind of be the player you want to, like, you can be. Like, you don't have to do too much. And I think Treylon Burks is going to benefit from that. We talked about this the other day or last week when we talked about DJ Moore. It's, even though D-Hop is much better than DJ Moore is, but what it allows Mooney and Claypool to do, what it allows the other guys to do by having a guy like that on the other side, who is going to command targets, who is going to command defensive coverage to him, it allows those other guys to be kind of take the weight off their shoulders from being the guy to carry everything. And the thing with the wide receivers here that concerned me is the Derrick Henry show. And it's going to be the Derrick Henry show. You have some more efficiency on the outside, and this is what scares me is it's not so much the player that I don't like, it's the system that I don't like. I don't really like the system. I mean, we've seen A.J. Brown do it in this, but D-Hop and A.J. Brown are 2 very, very different receivers. So is Treylon Burks and A.J. Brown. And again, we have to think that Tannehill is going to be efficient enough and he's going to be productive enough to sustain multiple guys in the receiving game. Like, yeah, we think that D-Hop is going to be good. So, yeah, to answer your question, I am going to be targeting Treylon Burks, but I think it's going to be a little bit later. This is a guy I think is going to slip. He was being I wanted nothing to do with him before D-Hop got there. Now I have a little bit of interest, but it's not enough to be like, oh, I want to grab him above his ADP or I want to grab him at ADP. Like another guy I want to slip to me. I'll draft him at value. There's no one else I want in the receiving game from this team.
There is one guy I'd take a shot on, and in terms of wide receivers, I wouldn't take a guy on anybody else, because you're talking about Nick Westbrook, Akine, and Kyle Phillips. But Chig Okonkwo, wrapping up the rest of this offense here as a tight end, he gets thrown into that bag. He's getting a lot of hype coming into this year. If you listen to any other podcast, people are hyping him up big time. And I will say
in one game where he finished at tight end 3.
Well, no, I'll give you some numbers.
You extrapolated those numbers throughout the course of the season from that one game that he played, then he would be tight end 3 overall. Go.
No. I'll explain to you where they're going those directions, and I see it, but what Chris is alluding to is a small sample size for Chick. But let's talk about Tannehill real quick. 2020 and 2021, he was both respectively quarterback 8 and quarterback 12. He threw for 33 touchdowns in 2020, 21 touchdowns in 2021, which put him in good positions there. If he can even get back to his 2021 with, over 20 touchdowns through the air and about 3,500 yards, I like Burks and I like D-Hop and I like Chig. But again, is that too tall of an order for somebody, in that situation? And it may be, it may not be. Does D-Hop move the needle for you? Maybe. But with Chig here, he had a low target share. low on target share, but high on target rate. So when he was in the game, he was targeted. His ADOT was top 11 for tight ends. I know some people like to hear about ADOTs, and some people like Chris over here don't really care about ADOT. But what I will say about him is he had 32 receptions for 450 yards, 14 yards per catch, and 3 touchdowns. So he was a big playmaker. The reason why is in the routes that he actually ran, he was number 1 in yards per route run, number 2 in yards per target for tight ends, and number 1 in yards per reception for tight ends last year. But again, we're talking about such a small sample size in terms of total targets that he had and total routes actually run. That's why people are like up in arms. But that was before, that's when you had nobody to throw to in that offense. You were throwing to, Robert Woods. You were throwing, AJ Brown wasn't there anymore. You were throwing to Traylon Burks if he was healthy. To me, now you've got D-Hop. You've got another season of Burks there. I don't think Chig is going to be one of these all of a sudden top 5 touchdowns that people are calling these breakout players and all here. I think he's very talented, but I think you're going to see in a situation where like he probably finishes tight, maybe top 10 in tight ends. But we always talk about what's the difference between the top 3 tight ends and the rest of the top 10. It's like 100 points. So like, again, flip of the coin. I just don't see the volume being big enough for Chig.
They're going to skew numbers. Exactly. Like he had 32 receptions last year and people want to argue, he only started in like, 6 games or 8 games. It's like there was no one there last year. And just to refer back to your point with Tannehill in 2021, when he had his best passing season there, right? So AJ Brown was there.
2020, AJ Brown was there.
So, and 2021, AJ Brown was there.
Yep.
And 2021, Derrick Henry missed half the season. So, that's the reason Tannehill had his numbers go up, and he threw for 26 touchdowns. And I just don't see it happening. The volume's not there for this passing offense. And like you said, now they have D-Hop on the other side, and it might open some things up to have the other guys be more efficient. But in terms of target share, like, let me answer me this: how many games this year do you think that they're going to throw the ball 25 plus times? Over under on that? 6 games? 5 games?
I would say
that's where I see it.
6. I would say 6 games, and that's mostly too because you don't forget, like this team, they didn't win a ton of games. They won 7 games last year, so they were playing from behind, and they were still 3rd least in passing attempts and 4th least in passing yardage. Like when you get into the red zone, they're not passing the ball around the red zone. You're going to feed Derrick Henry till it's 3rd down or 4th down. So, to me, again, that's what moves the needle for me is the passing volume. We don't need to talk any more about the Titans because we know what it is. It's Derrick Henry. It's D-Hop. Anybody outside of that, you're piecing together something like Traylon Burks is going to be a bench player. Tannehill is going to be a backup quarterback or a second quarterback in 2 QB leagues. And Chig is going to be a dart throw in terms of tight ends with upside that you're looking for in that big group. So
I just think that there's so many this next grouping of tight ends is all kind of mushed together. Like he doesn't have the most upside, and you can take like a 4-game sample size where he was super efficient and look at that, but you can take a 4-game sample size from any of these guys in that category. Like take Dalton Schultz in his best 4 games, and he's going to outperform Chig in his best 4 games. So this is my point is like, and they use him a lot more. Like Dalton Schultz, they use a lot more in the red zone, and he's been used a lot more in the red zone over his career. So like that is a lot more upside. Same thing with Njoku. Same thing with Everett. Like all those guys are in the same category, but those guys have more upside because they've done it in the past on offenses that like to use tight ends in the red zone. The Titans in the red zone, this team is based around 2 things. They play good defense and they run the football.
Yeah.
And then that's how Vrabel coaches. And if you think that they're going to all of a sudden develop into something that they're not, like you're just dreaming. You're dreaming about what this offense could be instead of what it is.
Well, I think the biggest talk for Chig,
the identity of this offense.
The biggest thing for Chig was that if he was going to be the number 2 pass catcher behind Traylon Burks before D-Hop came there. That's what made sense. And so people need to pump the brakes on him a little bit and understand that you now have a guy that can command 14 targets, easily in a game where Chig had never gotten more than 6, and that was in the times where Traylon Burks was hurt, and he was the number 2 option last year. So that's all for our AFC South. Tune in next episode. We'll be going over the NFC South to finish up the back end of the NFL divisions. If you like the content today, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification button. Feel free to leave us a comment. We'd like to interact with all our listeners. And we'd like to, if we're wrong on a stat, if you have a better take than we do, or if you don't think something is what we said is going to be, we want to hear it, because we'll go back and forth with you happily. And we'll love to bring up any comments in the upcoming podcast as well. So thanks for tuning
Throw
on.
the Chig comments. Throw the Chig comments.
Send them our way. Send them our way.
Send them our way.
All right. Tune in next time.